But the same second he looked round at the young man, and gave the nervous jerk of his head and neck that Constantine knew so well, as if his neckband hurt him, and a quite different expression, wild, suffering, and cruel, rested on his emaciated face. I wrote to you and Sergei Ivanovich both that I don't know you and don't want to know you. What is it you want? He was not at all the same as Constantine had been fancying him. The worst and most tiresome part of his character, what made all relations with him so difficult, had been forgotten by Konstantin Levin when he thought of him, and now, when he saw his face, and especially that nervous twitching of his head, he remembered it all. I didn't want to see you for anything, he answered timidly. I've simply come to see you. His brother's timidity obviously softened Nikolai. His lips twitched. Oh, so that's it? He said. Well, come in, sit down. Like some supper? Masha, bring supper for 3. No, stop a minute. Do you know who this is? He said, addressing his brother, and indicating the gentleman in the jerkin. This is Mr. Kritsky, my friend from Kiev, a very remarkable man. He's persecuted by the police, of course, because he's not a scoundrel. And he looked round in the way he always did at everyone in the room. Seeing that the woman standing in the doorway was moving to go, he shouted to her. Wait a minute, I said. And with the inability to express himself, the incoherence that Constantine knew so well, he began, with another look round at everyone, to tell his brother Kritsky's story, how he had been expelled from the university for starting a benefit society for the poor students and Sunday schools, and how he had afterwards been a teacher in a peasant school, and how he had been driven out of that too, and had afterwards been condemned for something. You're of the Kiev University? Said Konstantin Levin to Kritsky, to break the awkward silence that followed. Yes, I was of Kiev, Kritsky replied angrily, his face darkening. And this woman, Nikolai Levin interrupted him, pointing to her, is the partner of my life, Maria Nikolaevna. I took her out of a bad house, and he jerked his neck saying this, but I love her and respect her, and anyone who wants to know me, he added, raising his voice and knitting his brows, I beg to love her and respect her. She's just the same as my wife, just the same. So now you know whom you've to do with. And if you think you're lowering yourself, well, here's the floor, there's the door. And again his eyes traveled inquiringly over all of them. Why I should be lowering myself, I don't understand. Then, Masha, tell them to bring supper, 3 portions, vodka and wine. No, wait a minute. No, it doesn't matter. Go along. Chapter 25. So you see, pursued Nikolai Levin, painfully wrinkling his forehead and twitching. It was obviously difficult for him to think of what to say and do. Here, do you see? He pointed to some sort of iron bars, fastened together with strings, lying in a corner of the room. Do you see that? That's the beginning of a new thing we're going into. It's a productive association. Constantine scarcely heard him. He looked into his sickly, consumptive face, and he was more and more sorry for him, and he could not force himself to listen to what his brother was telling him about the association. He saw that this association was a mere anchor to save him from self-contempt. Nikolai Levin went on talking. You know that capital oppresses the laborer. The laborers with us, the peasants, bear all the burden of labor, and are so placed that however much they work they can't escape from their position of beasts of burden. All the profits of labor, on which they might improve their position, and gain leisure for themselves, and after that education, all the surplus values are taken from them by the capitalists. And society's so constituted that the harder they work, the greater the profit of the merchants and landowners, while they stay beasts of burden to the end. And that state of things must be changed, he finished up, and he looked questioningly at his brother. Yes, of course, said Constantine, looking at the patch of red that had come out on his brother's projecting cheekbones. And so we're founding a locksmiths' association, where all the production and profit and the chief instruments of production will be in common. Where is the association to be? Asked Konstantin Levin. In the village of Vozdrem, Kazan government. But why in a village? In the villages, I think, there is plenty of work as it is. Why a locksmiths' association in a village? Why? Because the peasants are just as much slaves as they ever were, and that's why you and Sergei Ivanovich don't like people to try and get them out of their slavery, said Nikolai Levin, exasperated by the objection. Konstantin Levin sighed, looking meanwhile about the cheerless and dirty room. This sigh seemed to exasperate Nikolai still more. I know your and Sergei Ivanovich's aristocratic views. I know that he applies all the power of his intellect to justify existing evils. No, and what do you talk of Sergei Ivanovich for? Said Levin, smiling. Sergei Ivanovich? I'll tell you what for. Nikolai Levin shrieked suddenly at the name of Sergei Ivanovich. I'll tell you what for. But what's the use of talking?